Netflix just did an exclusive interview with Total Film and a lot of interesting things came up, so I felt the need to make a video on it to keep all of you guys in the loop. In this interview, they go over the past mistakes with the last live action movie and how they're not going to fall into the same traps. They also go over the 2-year-long post-production that this show has had and how it's the biggest thing they've ever done. There's also this new image of Aang that was released that has some cool details in it. As always, we're going to be breaking down the entire article in this image right here, so if you don't want to miss anything, then you better stay here until the very end of the video. The article immediately begins saying that if your only experience with Avatar is a 2010 live-action adaptation, then you need to reset your expectations for Netflix's live-action series. They go on to quote Albert Kim saying, "Our goal was to make sure our version was faithful in spirit to the animation, but at the same time, we knew we had to appeal to a new generation of viewers who have never seen the original." Now, of course, this quote is kind of vague, and we'll find out exactly what this means next month when the show releases, but here is my take on things with the information we know now. They want the show to be like the original, humorous and a fun adventure, but they also want it to not be super silly at times. They're gonna go for a more serious vibe when it needs to be serious, but they're also gonna have it be silly when it needs to be silly. Basically, they want a better blend of the two than season 1 of the animated series was. At times in season 1 of the animated series, it was kind of all over the place, mainly because they didn't know if they were gonna get cancelled and a lot of drama behind the scenes, but at times, it was a kid's show that was a little bit too silly at times and a little bit too serious at other times. This time, they're trying to make a better blend of the two. But again, that's just my take on things. The article goes on to tell new readers what Avatar: The Last Airbender is all about, but if you're watching this channel, well, you're well aware of what Avatar is, so we can just skip over this part. This part of the article is one of my favorite parts of the article. It's not the biggest part, but I personally like it because they go over what it was like to cast the characters. Featuring a predominantly Asian and indigenous cast, finding actors who could embody fan favorite characters like waterbender Katara, her goofball brother Sokka, Ozai's disgraced son, Zuko, and especially Aang was a battle against the elements, stating that they needed someone who could capture the essence of the character, whether it's its warmth or child wonder or the humor Aang has. This again kind of supports what I said earlier about them keeping the humor and finding a better balance. A lot of fans have been worried that Netflix's adaptation will be too serious and ruin the humor that the original had. I myself used to say that this was probably going to be the case, but now, with them coming out and saying all of this, I don't really think we have to worry about that anymore. In the years since 2010, the Shyamalan's film's flimsy bending has been widely ridiculed, something visual effects supervisor Marion Spates has a plan to avoid, stating that their biggest goal was to find out if bending was real, what would it actually look like? For instance, with firebending, we use blowtorches as reference to get that kind of fidelity and detail. I know, I've said for the longest time that the VFX was not the problem with the last Airbender movie, it was the martial arts and how the bending was performed. In my last video, I went way more into detail about this, so if you want to learn more about that, the link will be in the description down below. However, I will say this, obviously, it's a good thing that they're making the VFX look even better. That can't be bad, that is a very good thing. We already know Netflix fixed the martial arts problem as well. Although it wasn't mentioned in this article, these guys are just VFX guys, so they wouldn't really be too knowledgeable on that part of things. But again, we went over this in my last video. Bringing the fantastical world of Avatar with its colossal flying mounts, imaginative locations, and epic action to live action was no easy feat. With a nearly 2-year-long post-production period overseen by producer Jabbar Ramzani, Jabbar goes on to say that this project is certainly the biggest thing that he has ever worked on. The complexity and quantity of the VFX shots that we're dealing with, that's really the challenge. Now, what's most interesting about this, at least to me, that this guy, Jabbar Ramzani, has overseen VFX projects for a lot of crazy high budget shows, such as Game of Thrones, Lost in Space, and even Stranger Things. Stranger Things and Game of Thrones are widely known as being some of the best looking shows with a ridiculously high budget, and he's saying Avatar was even bigger and more challenging than those. I'm assuming most of this is because of Appa, potentially Koizilla, Heibai, and of course the bending, that's super hard as well. I can definitely see why those would make it more challenging than Stranger Things or even Game of Thrones. If this doesn't show you that Netflix is taking this as serious as possible, I don't know what will. The closing statements of this article go over how the 8-episode first season is set to cover the animated show's first 20-episode book, saying it won't be a one-to-one adaptation of the show, but it will stay true to the original series in ways that matter. It's the process literally going from from 2D to 3D. We had to flesh out characters, fill in gaps, and in certain instances, go off in new directions. It was a process of dimensionalizing the characters, so that was really exciting. Okay, to me, I really like this. I want there to be changes. We've been starved of Avatar content for far too long now, so any storyline is good for me. I welcome all changes as long as they either fit the canon or are just really fun in general. There was a rumor a while back saying that any changes that Netflix made had to be approved by Paramount, but I don't actually know how true that is. But I thought it was worth mentioning. The article not only came with a lot of new information, but we also got this new image of Aang. This is the clearest frontal shot we have ever gotten of Aang. For the first time, you can clearly see the designs in Aang's tattoo here. It looks like there's airbending symbols in the arrow along with air swooshes. The outline seems to be Tibetan symbols as well. It's actually really funny how Avatar Studios made their arrow on their website just slightly different from this one in the live action. I guess there still is a little bit of beef there. It's just really funny. Aang's staff does seem to be pretty thick here, and a lot of people don't particularly like it. I think it makes sense that the staff's a little bit thick considering wings are supposed to come out of this thing. I'm curious to see if there's some sort of spring mechanism here at the top that comes out. It does seem that way, but for all we know, looks can be deceiving, and this will just be a VFX glider, which I don't have an issue with. I just think practical stuff tends to be kind of cool. Like every image that Netflix has released for this show, the background is blurred. I know they don't want to reveal too much. They just want to reveal enough to keep fans here for the build-up. It almost looks like he's here at an air temple with what looks to be like a giant gong in the background, but again, it's really hard to tell. The symbol here on the glider is the same one as the Avatar Studios logo, so we know there's no weird changes here. Overall, the image is cool. I like it. As much as I love making videos on these articles and speculating with all of you, I think I'm ready to finally see some more bending and all of the acting, and I'm just ready to see that trailer. Hopefully we get it next week during MLK weekend, which does seem to be what most people think. Alright, subscribe to stay up to date on all things Avatar, leave a like, and I will see you guys, hopefully, sometime next week with my final Netflix video before we get that trailer breakdown.